I'm sure glad that we gave the memo to Justin to wear his sexy shorts today, though.
I know.
We got him positioned really well. He's like, oh, we're going to.
Do we want to put you on a lower chair so that way you can show more leg, or just kind of have a
bit higher so you can like see
nuts?
Too.
Let's get fake nuts, prosthetics.
Like halfway through this plot. Yeah, we need to use this.
So, how did you make your jungle juice in college?
We actually didn't do jungle juice. We did. It was big red moonshine, and what that was Everclear with hot tamales that sit in it. So it turned very, very sweet and very cinnamony.
Those were the only ingredients: hot tamales and Everclear.
Ask Jordan about this because there was a kid. I had just one flask left, 8-ounce flask. There was this little douchebag kid that was down, not a kid, but a kid, and college-age kid, very young-minded. And I was like, here, try this. No. It's got Everclear. Well, he goes upstairs. He must have had a shot, so he comes back downstairs. We're sitting there playing Halo, doing our thing, Jordan and I, and he not only decides he wants to take some, he drank all 6 ounces of the last bit of my big red moonshine.
Oh, gosh.
We were about a half mile away from the stadium. It was on game day. He passed out. He got in a fight, passed out, and got arrested by the time he got to the stadium itself.
Oh my gosh.
So that's how I made mine. And a little backstory. What was yours like?
Well, I never
pull that up just a little closer to you.
I never drank, before college, not until I'm like 21, obviously. But
your mom is not watching this, by the way.
Well, I went to
she might now.
Yeah, I went to a party in college, and the funny thing about it was on a street called Sesame Street, and it was the worst neighborhood where I went to school. And so
hood ass Big Bird.
Yeah. Sesame
checking
Street.
IDs.
Bitch, I live in a trash can.
But when you walk up there, you have to have, guys can't get into a party by themselves. You have to have a girl with you. So like we decided to go there's 5 guys. We had 2 girls with us. So we had this whole pack of freshmen going up to Sesame Street. And we get into this one party. And I never drank. And they said, oh, here, try this, jungle juice. And it was this big cooler. I actually think it had it in the bathtub. It was awesome. I don't want to know what else was in there. But it was just, looked like fruit punch. So I had it. I think feeling good. My buddy said, hey, we're going to go over here real quick. Are you okay? And I said, yeah. So they left, came back. After I was drinking this jungle juice, they came back, and I was on a couch, kind of this big smile on my face. And I had 2 or 3 girls just sitting with me. And I was the happiest, I ever was. And it was just, I think, Everclear and fruit punch. And that's how I got it all started.
All right. So we didn't.
Okay. You didn't. I don't know where you went to school. Where did you go to school?
Bloomsburg University.
Okay, that
Small
sounds
school in
nice.
Pennsylvania.
Very white.
Yes.
Gabe's from a different type of place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
When I first met him, he had a goat, and when I asked why there are holes through the bathtub, through the shower, he said, well, it's better to shoot holes than to actually install a drain that works.
I don't think the second part was true.
But it was pretty close.
But yeah, no, I went to college in a double wide, basically. And our jungle juice version was called Summer Brew. It was a 30-pack of Natty cans, just dump it in a cooler, and then 2 handles of vodka, and then lemonade powder. So it was just beer and vodka with some powder for flavor. And I drank this one time in Lawrence when I was visiting KU, and I was taking my girlfriend up there to move her into her dorm, and I blacked out on this, and I was sitting on the couch just faded, and get up real quick to go outside and throw up, and the door was jammed, so I ended up throwing all over the linoleum landing right when you leave.
Perfect.
And I finally get up and finish outside, and my girlfriend got word that I threw up, and she ran after me to make fun of me, slips on the linoleum that I puked in, and just covered her entire body with my own Summer Brew vomit.
I have got to say, this podcast is starting different than the others.
That's my
Wait,
fault.
this is for
I
our.
apologize. I brought up jungle juice.
This is for our marketing agency, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Unfiltered podcast, and this is different because for the first time we have a creative sitting with a couple creatives, smoking cigars, drinking whiskey. Thanks to, what's the name of the company who gave it to us?
Black whiskey. Ondayan black corn whiskey.
Thank you to Black Whiskey. Okay, that's
Biz, is that
work.
approved?
That's okay, but we're politically okay.
Okay.
Okay, we're all right. But with us is Justin Miller. Some would call him the third husband to the first lady to the runner of all things Frisco connected, Ashley Miller.
Yep. Thank you guys for having me here.
You are.
It's already off to a good start.
So let's just hop into that because what's it like being married to Ashley Miller? Everyone who's watching knows who Ashley Miller is, by the way.
Yeah, of course. Well, before COVID, it was crazy. With COVID and the pandemic the last year, not as crazy. Obviously, a lot more virtual. But the good thing about that, we had a 1-year-old, or he's about to be 1 tomorrow. So we had a baby boy back April 9th, which is a whole other story during this, the pandemic. But we got more family time in. So, but yeah, I mean, we're both super extroverted people, so we miss doing stuff like this, is getting out. Especially Ashley. I'm extroverted. Everyone knows she's super extroverted, and she loves and misses being out with people and building relationships. And she knows everybody in Frisco, and so I'm happy. Like it seems to be getting better. We can get back out. I'm happier for her to get out because, like I said, she's super extroverted, but also for our sanity being two, extroverts being inside a house with a baby last year. So, but
and Finley. Finley's what?
Yeah,
3
Finley's
or
she's
4?
3. She's 3.5. She'll be 4 in October, and so we shipped her off to daycare. We had our son go back to daycare last week. I told you guys he lasted 3 days, got sick, got me sick. So we're learning about that first year of daycare, being sick and building up that immune system.
And your son's name is Oakley.
Oakley, yep.
Is it after the brand?
No, I mean, I like Oakley sunglasses, but honestly, it was funny because some people will pick, kids' names from something they heard at church or a Bible verse. And with Finley, it was like Ashley found something on Pinterest. Or with Oakley, I like the word Oakley because the word oak, it means strong as an oak tree. And it's oh yeah, my son's gonna be a man and tough. And so that's why
Climb trees.
Like climb trees. Be super stubborn and be a dick. But hopefully not yet.
Watch him be super soft and afraid of heights.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's
there's that
artistic.
too. Yeah. We still gotta love him.
Because you are quite artistic and very talented at what you do. You're more on the design side of things. So we could hop into a little bit of that process, that creativity. Where do you fit in the world of marketing, branding, creativity, this world that we all live in and share and every business does?
Yeah, I'm probably less on the marketing side. I'm more with UI designing websites. I work for a consulting firm called Slalom. I've been there for years, which was interesting too, starting a job and then COVID hits. But they've been great through the process. So I've been in consulting for about 8 years, in the design world for about 14 years. I worked agency, I worked in government contracting back in the day. And for me, I focused on digital design, so it's websites, mobile apps. I also do branding, logo, just thinking overall their branding, when working even with clients, when it comes to the website, I want to make sure that I'm keeping their brand intact and that I want to be consistent and tell their story well.
Are you self-taught or?
Actually, a lot. Now, I went to school, like I said, went to good old Bloomsburg University, go Huskies, which no one here has ever heard of, because I grew up in Pennsylvania and went to Bloomsburg. I was undeclared for 2 years. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an architect. I was like, man, that's a lot of math. I can't do that. But I took one graphic design course in Photoshop back in the day. And I worked at an internship for a TV station where I did the ads they have in the back behind the news anchor and stuff like that. And so I have more of a traditional art background, but when I found out about Photoshop, where instead of painting over and starting over, I could just hit Command Z and start over, that makes this a lot easier.
Have you ever felt that in life when you hit, you mess up when you should have taken a turn? I wish I could just Command Z that.
I physically do that sometimes.
Well, there's times where I guess kind of similar, because in the digital space, where I remember going to work in the parking garage and I would go to say, hey, Alexa. I'm like, shit, I'm in a parking garage. Alexa's not here. So like, my house is all smart homed up, so I can just say, Alexa, turn off this and all that kind of stuff. But there has been times where like I do want to hit Command Z, especially if dealing with certain individuals where it may be, tough.
Finley.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's start over on this day. So
Yeah, kids are super resilient though. I just run through it. No, so from a creativity standpoint, some of the brands that you've worked from are some very, very notable brands. One of which I think every American has a connection with, which is
Go Local Group,
and also Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of big brands, like Chuck E. Cheese, Go Local Group. Let's see, At Home, Buckle, Finish Line, Carhart, a bunch of big brands, and cool, especially Carhart. They've been around since late 1800s. So it's really cool to work with the brands like that.
Yeah, when we started working together, you were with like Carhart and I think maybe Foot Locker or
Finish Line.
Finish Line?
Similar to Foot Locker.
Yeah, and I was just like, wow, that's a really nice portfolio of people to be working with.
Yeah, I do love it, especially when you're a young designer, like a young professional. Like, I want to work with these big brands. I want to work with Apple and stuff like that. The one caveat to that is that you have these big clients where there's big companies. There's a lot more red tape rather than if you work with a small local company or small business. There's more leverage to experiment and maybe take risks, because especially, and I love that as a creative, because then I can really think outside the box. Not saying I can't with, say, a Red Lobster, Finish Line. They were all great clients to work with, but there's just more, I guess, at risk. And so there's pros and cons to that.
What are some of the things that you've learned from a more national or international scale of business that you would recommend that people take into their local business? Or how would you translate some of the big stuff into looking bigger, looking better, giving a better experience?
That's a good question. I think it's not as flashy or fancy, but even stuff, it's small but important, like ADA compliant, where thinking through everybody that's coming to your site, especially on a digital platform, where making sure text is legible, people that have, say, disabilities, that they can still access your site, because no matter what, people are gonna have to see your site small or big. So that's one thing I've noticed, but excuse me, I'm trying to think of what another example of that, but nothing comes to mind right now.
That's something that's definitely overlooked, and I think we have for a great deal of time, which is making sure someone who's visually impaired, who you would think, well, they're not surfing the web, but making sure that a website is legible and it's not red font on a black background.
It's kind of cool too, because everything seems to just go back to the easiest, most rudimentary. Like, all branding now is so straightforward. The best stuff you see is just clear colors, black text on white background. I mean, some of that stuff it's so classic, and it's just timeless.
Yeah, I'd say it's timeless, and then also now, because we have, it's going from desktop to mobile, if you have a bunch of elements of craziness going on, how do you make it work on mobile? So it's like you're thinking through all that kind of stuff, especially if you're a developer developing a website. That's a lot of extra work. Now, I'm not saying it's not worth it. You just try to figure out, okay, what's going to add value to the business, to the user, to the company. But yeah, that's the one thing that's more simplified. But yeah, even with like ADA compliance too, not only like the visual side, but just even thinking through on the development side of someone that can only use the keyboard, like tabbing through a form. So if you're tabbing from, you're typing a contact form, you have your first name, then it jumps down to phone number, then jumps up to your company. Like, so if it jumps like that, it's just not as good of an experience. And that's what I focus on. Like, I love the design, but it's more focused on the user experience at the end of the day. I want someone to say, man, this site was badass. Like, I want to come back here. I want to tell other people about it. Now, granted, you have internal portals, then you have Chuck E. Cheese. So there's a difference there, but I want to always, no matter what it is, make sure they have a great experience.
With the rise of web tools, web builders like Squarespace and Wix and WordPress and all of these very robust, and Shopify from an e-com, but all of these very, very robust website platforms that anyone can build on, why are companies that are Carhart and of that quality, why are they still developing their own program? Why not just make the biggest, baddest version of the CMS that they can have anyone go in and use. And content management system for those who, that's content
Yeah,
management
CMS,
system.
yep.
So the things, the web builders that anyone can go on for $100 and build their own site for, why are they using development?
Yeah, that's a good question. But there has been times where I've worked with clients in the past and they came to me and said, hey, I want to build this if it's for themselves or their company, or if it's pretty small, if it's a brochure site, a lot of times like, hey, we're going to be probably too expensive. There's Squarespace or these options, like you said, for them to do that if they want, where they don't need a full custom thing like a Carhart or Red Lobster. For like them, I worked mainly on the ordering side. So it's really diving in and thinking like there's still like a CMS system, but there's still a lot of custom work on the front end that we have to do to set them up. But even for Chuck E. Cheese, it was tough because even though they had a CMS and I set them up with a bunch of templates, there's always new things coming up. There's always new approaches where you just can't do in the CMS. And a lot of times for a person like, say, with me or a consultant with the experience that I have, where I have a lot of experience of doing things the wrong way or things that I've seen just from data where I can say, let's not do this because I've seen this go the wrong path. And not something like, I think what clients appreciate from me is just being willing to push back, not as a jerk way, but just giving them my honest opinion, because that's why they're paying me to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of easy to think that people will get like offended when you tell them that they might not be doing it the right way, but that's why they're working with you, and that's why we're working with somebody as big as you guys. How big is the team that you work with?
Well, it depends. Like, I worked with a big client, was Capital One, but I was out there by myself. I'm working on a website now. It's been a lot of fun because I get to be really creative, but it's pretty much 3 people. But then back when I did Chuck E. Cheese, it was about 8 of us. So it depends. It depends on, I think, experience of the people on it. So if you obviously have a lot of, like, 3 people that have 15 plus years experience, there's a lot of things you can wear a bunch of different hats. If you're straight out of college or a younger professional, then you might need multiple people. So it depends. What I have enjoyed is where I would work with another designer and kind of coach them through it. I'm trying to learn to get better at that, where, hey, I like to have control of everything, and so I like to have to make sure I keep my hands off and let them learn, even if they make mistakes. There's times where there's a client where there was a mistake, or not even on our side, but they were upset about something, and it was good for this person, this younger designer, to see it. Because I told them, hey, we did everything we could, and it's one of those things where we went a path and pushed for something that was the right way, but they were expecting us to just do what they wanted, even though it wasn't the right way. And so it was good for him to see that and experience that, because he maybe had 2 or 3 years of experience. Even though it sucked during the time, it's great to see that and to fail. I mean, I can say it now, it's good to fail afterwards, but during it's not the most fun.
Yeah, those failures they are not fun, but you get through them real quick. And once you've stepped on enough landmines and the clients you shouldn't have worked with, and you get through all of it, and then you go, even the first 5 that you step on, well, the 6th you step on, you're in the middle of it. You go, okay, well, I know where this is going. Okay, well, it's going to suck for a little bit. Let's just keep pushing. And I think that's just earning your stripes. What I'm curious is, speaking creative process, because a website that is, we say a website and people think, oh, you got a homepage, you got this. But when you're talking about the user experience and the user interface, and every single element has to be designed.
Yeah, Carhart is robust. I mean, how many articles are they pushing out, and everything that's the user interface, not just to go purchase a product, but to be involved with the brand. And I'm sure that's a lot. Do you work with, outside of just the web development, do you work with like other portions, like the email and everything that kind of goes back into it?
It depends. I mean, when it comes to for Chuck E. Cheese, it was pretty intense because I had to present my ideas and a path forward to 5 C-suite people. So the CEO, CMO, CIO, every C-level I didn't even know existed. But
everybody at Chuck E. Cheese is C-level.
Well, and they were great to work with, but it was just, on the fly, getting on a whiteboard, saying if they had a question, just kind of explaining that kind of stuff. But so I'll work with not only just development side, it's the marketing side. Depending on what the project is, it could be, even say someone that's, let's say, a janitor at a place where, hey, if this affects their work and what they're doing, we want to talk to them. So I leverage a lot of my design, and I've learned this, just from experience, but data is huge. I can make the most beautiful design out there, but if it's not backed up with data, it's not, and it doesn't function, well, no one's going to use it. Like, oh, cool, it looks great. And then, because like you guys know, people spend 2 seconds on a site. And so you want to be able to grasp them with the design, but also have content on there that grabs them too, because no one reads online either. So it's like, what's that wow factor? What's going to, pow and gets their attention? And so a lot of times I've used something called a Crazy Egg, where it would show heat mapping on a website. And so I can see, okay, look, everyone's clicking over here. Let's keep this because there's a lot of heat here. And then other pages where I would look and do my research, no one knows where to click. Say there's a picture of a person, they're clicking on the eyeball. Like, okay, well, that's an issue if they're trying to click on a person's face. It's think through that and looking through Google Analytics, all that kind of stuff, where I never thought I would be into that stuff as much, but it's so powerful. And it also backs up the design when presenting it to the client. Because what I would do, especially at Finish Line, they had Crazy Egg that was on their website. And so before every presentation showing design, say I have a home page or a product detail page of like a sneaker, I would show the current website. I would show the data that was showing on the current website, and then I would show my design. And so I would explain what things I made adjustments to and things that were working today where I didn't want to touch and mess up. Because you don't want to, I've learned too, when you totally revamp something, even though it's a better experience and looks great, it could still be a detriment to the company because the users are so used to a certain pattern. So when they come back, they're like, whoa, why is everything different? And they go somewhere else. Because like say for Buckle, like, okay, I'll go to another clothing store. I'll go to American Eagle. So there's so many options out there. So that's why it's always so key to look at the data and help back it up.
And that's why you pay for a marketing professional, because a lot of people can create a good looking design or a good looking site based off a template, but it's very much like a language. And to me, it reminds me of learning a language, which is at the very beginning, all I want to do is make the design, make it look pretty, or know the words so I can communicate. But then as I got deeper and deeper, those things that I discounted, like it would be equivalent to the placement of graphics, it would be the analytics, it would be the heat mapping, it would be all of these different elements, which are the small details in the language where you go, well, I'm just never going to learn that, and I'll just speak like Rain Man and and go through. But then as you get into it, in order to become fluent in your design, you have to be able to, that's the big main difference, is someone who just looks at it from a face value versus going, this is here because of this. This data is telling us this. And it's difficult for us to translate that information to clients oftentimes, which is nothing happens overnight. It has to be just sit at the wheel, just sit at the well and keep pumping it, because we have to digest a certain amount of data to onboard it to make our decision process from a longer term.
Yeah, I think kind of just the idea of it doesn't happen overnight, because it could. You could have one person do it, or you could have a team who you gotta work through different things and get everybody on the same page before you can even like make a push towards it. You said something about just client thinks they need something, but maybe it's not exactly what they need. And I think that's something that happens so much. It's like, hey, I need a new logo. Well, why do you need a new logo? And what's the reason? Like you can put a different name on it, but what's really going to change when you do that? Like what's the rest that's encompassed with that?
Yeah. And that's the one thing. It was tough early on to tell, like, okay, I can do a logo for you. And then you do whatever the client says. And not saying the client's always wrong.
I think everybody goes through that, though. As from like a designer perspective, like I've had my fair share of, I'll do a $150 logo. I mean,
yeah, exactly. And yeah, we've all been there. I think too, as we said, you have to make mistakes. You're going to fail. But I think the big thing is not repeating those mistakes too, where, like you said, like I told, I had to give feedback to a designer a couple weeks ago where, hey, we missed these things here, but now that like you dealt with these tough situations, now going forward, these red flags are going to pop up, where then to make adjustment later on. But it takes confidence and it takes experience to be able to say, hey, C-level person at this big company, I don't think this is the right idea. And I said it's backfired. Even though I wasn't like a jerk about it and stuff like that, it's still, people are set in their ways of doing it a certain way, or they're used to say using some agency where they just do whatever they want from a marketing or design perspective, where then I come in And they're like, wait, why isn't this guy just doing what I want? And so I'll still fight for it, and I'll still even like kind of just talk through it. But I always want to be respectful. I obviously want to be a professional. But it just, it takes time, and you just build thick skin over the time too.
And you get to a point where it's, well, maybe this isn't the right fit. Whereas before it's, I'll take any work that we can get. But yeah, when you have the balls to kind of say, hey, I just don't know if this is all you need. I think you need this. If this is all you're looking for, maybe this isn't the right fit.
What's been helping has been watching Mad Men. So I'm just like Don Draper it and say, this person isn't a good fit, and I'm out. And then they come back to me later. No, I'm kidding.
I haven't seen it.
Ripping
Oh, really?
ears.
I probably should.
Yeah,
right?
you should.
Yeah, you should.
Very good.
It's one of those shows that I'm like scared to just devote 2 straight weeks to like get caught up. Like I like catching them right when they start, and I can just binge it for 3 days or whatever.
You can go in and out on Mad Men for
Okay.
sure. It's just cool.
It's relatable.
Yeah, and it's something that is in our world. But you see that, and I think you see that from a client perspective, is many clients will work with agencies or marketing people who are in there that do everything that they say that they want them to do. But then there is a disconnect of, okay, well, I'm hiring you, but the mentality has been trained of, well, the marketing guy, and some people call him my tech guy, my computer guy, whatever. They just do what I want them to do on that vision, but there's a reason why you're coming to us now. There's a reason why you're not still with them. And sometimes you do have to hear some of that reality, and we have to hear that reality and find that really weird balance in a creative world of, this probably isn't the right direction for the brand.
Yeah, that was one of the toughest things I dealt with a client where they had an internal agency and we were the consulting firm. We were helping on the development side, but they would constantly say, "Oh, you guys aren't design. We have our agency to do this." And the whole time, like, just kept my mouth shut. Like, well, I'm a designer. I can do this too. And over time, I proved that. So again, it was after having user experience, I learned to just keep my mouth shut. Don't get sensitive to it, because especially as a designer, I'm super emotional too. So like, it's like, this is my baby. Don't where I just had to learn to kind of just take it and then just prove it. Where I knew, okay, I can do this and prove that I can design whatever you want and do it well. But it's still, even as I've doing for the long as I have, it's still tough sometimes where it's like, hey, this guy's not creative. We need this agency to do it.
But ultimately, that is such a great way for value, is just being a recluse, just silently in the dark, knowing that you can do exactly what they want. And you just like, bam, just pop them out of nowhere. And they go, this is better than what we have.
Well, it was funny for the one example where the client wasn't happy with the direction I was going, even though I backed it with data, I showed competitors are doing it. It was for like their loyalty program. And I was like, hey, this is how people are doing it. This is why they're doing it. Here's data to back it up. What you want to do, because they wanted to do like a tabbed approach. But most of the time, there would be no content there. So, okay, well, why would we have, when someone comes to this page, there's no content there unless they're logged in and have other things going on. They have to have, say 6 months of activity to show anything there. And I just would go through it, but it was just interesting to see how they would constantly push back. But again, I think it was just because they were just used to this other agency that would just do what they wanted.
Mm-hmm. How do you deal with, this is a conversation that we've had back and forth a couple times, and it's something that everyone deals with, whether it's a creative agency or a local business that deals with another client or whatever it is. It could be an architect, it could be anything, but how do you digest and how do you adjust to client focus shift?
Are you saying like working on multiple projects?
So let's say for instance, you set up, you've got this deal, you put together your pitch, you put together your deck, your vision, your everything. You run your 60 days of sprint. You get through, and in that point, client, personality, team, something decides that there's been something that's shifted, and maybe they take you.
Direction.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with mutual people together where you go, hey, do you have an issue with focus drift?
Yeah, that's really tough. Luckily, when I worked with the consulting firm that I'm at, I haven't had to deal with that personally as much. Now, there's some times where we will say drift, where you just say picking your battles, like, hey, let's go back to the data. Remember, we spoke about this, where it's pulling them back, where it's not like, okay, yeah, let's go this way now. Because then you have scope creep and all that kind of stuff. It can be tough where there's times I have been into you, like, why is this happening again? Or why are we going this way? Where you put so much effort into it and so much research that say they hear something online or see something on TV, like, oh, you know what,
YouTuber.
everybody's going this way. We need to do this. We're like, no, we put the research for you. This is custom to what the strategy, to what you need. And so that is frustrating. And so it's just organic. That's the good and bad about doing what we do, or as a consultant. Like, it's so, you never know what you're going to get. So you have to be on your toes at all times, because you never know, the client's going to have a bad day, come in just shooting from the hip, and you just have to constantly adjust. And again, it just, it takes time, but after you get a certain experience, you're like, oh yeah, I remember doing this. I mean, honestly, that's the best thing now. I've worked in so many different industries where I can pull something from, say, Chuck E. Cheese and apply it to some pharmaceutical company, where maybe it's on a pricing structure or whatever it may be. It's kind of neat to say, oh yeah, you guys are having the same problem, to a different industry. We can still apply that approach to what you guys are doing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the challenge of the creative, is putting in as much work as goes in, from 9 o'clock at night to 2 o'clock in the morning, and then you get to the end, you're like, here's my science project, and they go, yeah, I kind of wanted a volcano.
Well, it's funny because I'm out. But back in the day, I remember, it's not as big of an issue with me now, but they would want, say a client would want multiple home pages, where it's tough, because the way I've gotten away from that now is utilizing data, having discovery sessions or design workshops with the client, so the exact path you want to go. But what I've actually done, I don't know if you guys remember style tiles back, they were a big thing back 10 years ago. And so essentially what a style tile is, it's like you have imagery, you have call to actions, so like buttons, interactive elements, you have typography, icons, whatever it may be. But I'd have 3 variations of it. So like, hey, here's this one is close to what you have today, enhanced, here's another version, and here's a crazy version. And so I do that early on so they can see what I'm thinking and bringing the client along the journey. So it's not, here's the homepage or here's this, final product. We're like, whoa, I didn't know we're going to go that way. And sometimes it works with going that path where like, oh, they love it. But if they don't, then there's a lot of rework, where doing this style tile approach, I said, like, I brought back after a decade old of a type of approach, but it worked because then they get excited about it early on, and there's not a lot of effort that goes into it early on too.
Mm-hmm. And it gives you a good home base. Where I'm curious is, I've pulled away from it as of in the recent past, but I know, Gabe, you have a ton of just trench time. Justin, you have as much trench time of just that creative process of how do you look at a blank slate of whatever the challenge is and bring something to life.
It's funny because I remember as a young pup, I remember like, yeah, I'm going to do this site. I would tell, say Asher or whomever, it's going to be awesome. And it wasn't like a big company, which I said it was fine because I love working with small companies. But it's funny, same with like a logo, where blank slate, where you talk yourself up or other people talk you up, and then you're like, okay, now let's go do it. Where I found, again, going into the research, obviously talking to the client, doing those interviews, and understanding their pain points, and then to get an opportunity to talk to people using the product. If it's cigars, if it's a website, whatever it may be, whoever interacting with your company, I want to talk to you because I want to know what you love and what you hate. Because then I know hey, client, we can fix these problems where people are going to talk about it when I use your site. And so having that initially, and then what I've loved to do too, again, I found like, there's things that we're naturally good at. Like I love building relationships, and I found I love just like diving into the clients, whatever they do, where I want them to look at me as their like an employee there. Like I'm a part of the team. I don't want them to look at me as an outsider or consultant. Then I'm not doing my job well. And so I love diving in, building relationships. And one way I learned to do that is like early on too is wireframing, where instead of sending over some wireframing and present it, I'll sketch out my ideas and walk through them with the client. And so we can make, adjustments as we go through, where it's not just me making designs and then showing it to them. And so that's what's helped me too, is just bringing them along, because then it cuts out that aha moment. Sometimes if it goes well, like the Don Draper, which you need to watch, Man, where you have this big pitch and everybody's like, yeah, but again, if it doesn't go well, then it's like, well, shit, now where do we go from here? So to your question about the creative process, it's, researching, data analysis, talking with users, And a lot of times, honestly, before I get into the aesthetic side, like I said, doing wireframes or if it's style tiles, I'm just scouring the internet. I just want to see what people are doing, because as I get older, I'm more out of touch. So I'm looking to see what's the newest and new. And I don't want to do trendy stuff, but I would say, hey, how are people handling this similar problem where I can do it and then have it look modern? Because I don't want to build a website or design a website where it looks super trendy now, and the next year it looks like it's super old. And so it's more with logos when you want something to be timeless, because you don't want to have someone redesign a logo every couple of years. You want it to be around for a decade, or if not longer, where it still looks fresh. Where similar to a website, I don't want it to be old, a year from the time I design it, and make it look, fresh and clean.
Mm-hmm. And chasing
So
the technology.
Fresh. So fresh and so clean.
Yeah, well, it's tough. But technology is obviously always changing. So
But I think it's better, because if you chase the technology and you don't chase the trend, you get yourself where those technologies that come in, very few technologies like automation, and you just look at the newer technologies, very few of those are going away. Although the trends are going to come and go as by definition.
Yep.
But what is your creative process?
I'm kind of curious of how often, when you get a brief, how often it looks like what your first kind of thought is. Because there's one example that I have where it actually came to life, and it was the cigar labels that we did with the bikini straps. I have a for Crux, we did these label designs, and the day that we talked about it, I sketched something up. I was like, let's do something different. Let's show a little bit of the cigar through. And we went through all these renditions. We went through 40 hours worth of renditions, and then ended up back at kind of my beginning spot. And I'm curious of how often do you have that kind of, I don't know. The epiphany, but then also the ability to bring it to life and present it to somebody.
No, honestly, that happens probably 90% of the time, especially with logos. Have this first easy concept done. Okay, now let's go spend another 2 weeks on it. And then you come back to the damn first thing. Gosh, dang. But I mean, it's good to go through that process, because then you're thinking through everything, and then you're better off, because then at least I feel better, because I vetted every option, and rather than, okay, do the first one, you go with it and say the client's happy, great. But then in the back of my head, well, was there other things? Could I push this more? And that's a lot of times I push my team members, because we have a small practice, our XD practice in Dallas, probably 10 of us, but I did a presentation just on creativity, where it's not just for the designer, it's for the developer, it's for the UX strategist, where it's on the creative side, it's how do you continue to push, where I can say what I like to do, I have a design done, and I know the client would be happy, we would be happy, but what areas can I push it to make it more custom for the client, where it's more of a aha moment? Because there was one, say with the Finish Line, where you're scrolling through a bunch of sneakers, and you can actually swipe across the image to see different colorways. No one did that, and I honestly thought it wasn't going to be successful. I thought, for me, my initial thought was, oh, it's going to be different angles of the shoe, and it turned out after user testing, okay, let's test it. Where I thought it was going to be bad, people loved it, because instead of them having to click in, see the shoe, come back, the pogo sticking, they could just swipe around. And so it's fun, where I like to do all that legwork up front within the creative process, where it gives me time to be creative. As you guys know, it's can't okay, I'm going to turn on a switch and then I have an hour to be creative. I want to be creative. It just doesn't work that way. You have to let it come to you. So I found doing that legwork up front through research and all that kind of good stuff, where it gives me space to be creative. And I'm super efficient too. I hate not getting things, utilizing my time the best way, which, great for the client, but where I make, as soon as I hear anything, I'm writing down notes, or just making sure, okay, what can I be doing, just to use all my time. Because I know with the creativity process, I could figure out something right away. Oh yeah, let's just do this bikini thing. Or it could take me a couple of days, or however long, to finally see, okay, this is it. Because there's times where again, this could work, but it is not, it's not badass. I always do something, and I'm proud of it if I can have it I'm happy to have it in my portfolio. I don't ever want to do something where I'm not happy to share it with other people.
That's almost like go local standards. There's been so many people that have worked with us for a little bit and then weeded out because they put out something that was subpar, and it's just, It's not going to cut it. That's kind of the standard I think you have to be to have successful in the creative industry at all.
Yep.
You talk about efficiency. I'm curious, like, just your, like, what's like a day in the life of, like, do you have like your day pretty blocked out? Do you know what you're going to do every day before, like the week of or the couple weeks before?
So we'll have like a setup, like we're with the client where we're saying, hey, how we're going to do these different sprints. So it's 2-week sprints and what we're going to do in those 2 weeks. Honestly, a lot of times I just like to get it done. Say for one example, I'm doing these style tile things and we were going to show them say mid-April. I got them done last week. Not saying like I'm super fast, but just it clicked, it worked. Okay, great. Now we have extra time to really push into the creative side. So for me, it's been interesting. What I have liked about with the pandemic and stuff like that, I'm at home where I have my office, my space, because I need a creative space. I like going into the office. I miss the collaboration. So if I could have that perfect balance where it's like, hey, especially for custom websites where it's not like say e-commerce where okay, we want to get them down through the funnel. Like it's a typical design or a user pattern where for certain websites where, hey, no one's ever done this before. We're going to try to revamp this thing or innovate or be super innovative where you need to, it hurts my head. You have to really think through it, but that's where I enjoy collaborating, getting the whiteboard, just sketching out tons of ideas. And so there's a balance between that and then, hey, there's times where I just need to focus for a day or two, whatever it is, especially early on because right now I'm also working on this homepage design where I'm trying to think through what I want their company to be, how their company is represented. And I want to do it well. So when people come there, they're like, dang, this is badass. But I just need that focus time to get there. And so I guess it's organic. Again, as a younger designer, it's probably tough to like, hey, what am I going to do these next couple of days where it's tough to deal with things that are kind of just floating out there where for me, I'm always thinking through, okay, I'm doing this, but for whatever reason, I have like a trigger in my head, like, okay, I've been working on this. Am I using my time wisely? Should I jump on this, work on information architecture, the structure of the website or whatever? And so it's pretty, I guess, organic, where it's not like things are set in stone, but I think that's just a part of being a creative too.
Yeah, I think the idea of kind of scheduling and a little bit of buffer time too to kind of spin off the wheels is important. Mm-hmm. Like you can get it done in a couple days, but it's good to take a step back, come back to it with fresh eyes and scheduling in a little bit of a buffer that allows you to show it to people, get some ideas. Even with those cigar labels, circling back, we printed a bunch off and showed everybody in the lounge and got some feedback, and it was just weird to come back to literally the exact, like, we're putting out the passport this year, and that's the one I just remember sketching up, and it was exactly the same as everything we went through.
You just think of that 40 hours that you spent.
Yeah, it's like,
it saved us 39 hours.
I know. Well, we billed Jeff. Sorry.
Well, and within there, finding that, running it until you're spinning in mud, and then stepping back and then seeing where that is. How important is it for your scheduled disconnection? Do you disconnect? Do you do these things? And how do you see that echo into your creative process? Do you build in time to go? Like for me, I love riding my bike. It's like, I've got to have a certain amount of hours on the seat. Mm-hmm. Otherwise I'm just shit for the rest of for the pending weeks. How much of that do you disconnect with 2 kids, a wife, a job,
2 dogs, mortgage? No, it's super important, especially in the creative process, because if you stare at it, and you guys know this, like you have to step away. I don't have something like built in per se, but too, I'm like ADD. I'm always moving, and even at the office, like I always hit my step goals because I'm always walking around. But especially at nighttime, say I work on something. I go to bed, hang out with the kids, whatever it may be, and then next day I come back to it and look like, okay, cool. Where you need to take those breaks, and I think for me, again, it's organic. Where it's like I don't have work on this from 1 to 2, have a break from 2 to 2:15, do the, whatever it is. Where I just know, what, I'm just going to walk outside, throw the ball at the dog, and then come back. I mean, that's what I did yesterday. Where it's just kind of taking a step away because you stare at it, then the pixels all kind of just get all blurry. Where you need to step away to make sure, because then also when you step away and come back to it, you're like, oh dang, this is dumb. Like, why am I going this way? Especially with one kind of element. But talking about like the details, like little elements, I have learned too where in my design process where I would focus on this spot and then only on this spot where it would all feel disjointed, where now I kind of comb through it all, block it out, making sure the design flow feels good overall, even from like a super rudimentary standpoint, but also making sure, okay, what is the best flow for the user to help make the client say more money too. I'm trying to think of the ROI, all that kind of stuff. So scanning through it constantly, it's just like painting a picture. You just keep adding on layers and layers and layers. And it's funny, my old boss called it painting or polishing a cannonball, where it's, like a cannonball, you don't need it to look pretty, you just need to go and blow up whatever. Where for me, I was trying to explain to him, because he wasn't a designer. I said, yeah, it's like I'm putting in extra work or doing more, and right now it would be good to ship it. But I want to make sure we're paying attention to details, like I said earlier, or it's, hey, how can we differentiate this client from their competitors? Like there's all those small interactions and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's a big CYA as well, because as you may see it, if you don't put in the extra hours to massage that out and then come back to it, those simple questions that may come up that you've run down, you've asked yourself all those questions, you've gotten to the answer and go, well, this is the reason why I'm not doing this. This is the reason why. So when you get to the pitch or you get to the reveal, they go, well, what if we did it that way? You know what? That's a good point. We actually did that, and it ended up turning it this way. Or we went with this font or whatever it is, but you put in that work so you can have the answers. So you said you can pull it back and go, this is the best direction because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things that I learned too as a young designer is articulating your design. Again, it can look great, but if a client asks you a question and you don't have a good answer, then you're going to lose that trust. And so I always make sure you look at every detail, and two, especially again early on with presenting, like that's a whole other thing. Luckily, Ashley's a great presenter, so I learned a lot from her, and it pisses me off because I'll never be as good as her. But it's storytelling. That's probably one of the biggest things as a designer is telling the right story. Especially too, because there's a lot of people or like say clients that can't see what we can. We're in our head like bikini. We can picture all that kind of stuff, but until you kind of flesh it out and explain that, and that's one of the funnest things I get to do as a creative is paint that picture for the client, because they can't do it and they may have a vision in their head, but to bring it to life and show it and then walk through that story where it's like as literal as, hi, I'm Johnny, I'm the user, I'm going through here and I want to click on this and blah, blah, blah. And this is how you make more money at the end of the day. And so it's being able to, because there's times where I got burnt where it's like, hey, why did you do this? Because someone else did it. Obviously isn't a good, it's a trend thing. Like, okay, well, that's not a good answer. Hey, I did this, or because of the data says this, or we spoke about this early on and research that this would be better for your ROI, your business, and so on. And so being able to articulate that is huge too.
How do you balance right now? Are you 100% with your consulting firm? Do you do freelance? How do you balance your life professionally?
Yeah, it's tough. It depends because it's ebb and flow. Right now, it's mainly focused on consulting. Right now, and what I do for the most part now is logos. I used to actually even develop websites, simple websites, and design them. But I did that a lot at work or my full-time job, where now it's just focused on logos. And one reason I like doing that because it's focused. And selfishly, with a website, there's so many things that can come into play. If it's, oh, I want this on Facebook, I want an email campaign, I mean, all these other things where I just don't have time to do it. And that's the one thing I learned too, is what I would do sometimes on this side because of timing, I would adjust my process, and not in a good way, where I would try to cut things out to save time and not try to cut corners, but like, okay, I would try to be efficient and do this, but where I learned instead of cutting things out, you just shorten it. So say for a typical project, it takes me a week to do research, but say I'm on a side project where I have a quarter of the time, then okay, I'll do research for a day, where instead of cutting out the research, I still make sure to do that and stick to the whatever 5-step, say, process that I have. But it's been a challenge. And there's some times where I'm not as busy with my full-time job where I can take on stuff, but right now, I'm trying to balance it because I'm coaching my, Finley, her 3-year-old soccer, and whew, that's been interesting. But I want to spend time with them and with my wife, and so we can have date nights and all that kind of stuff. So now it's shifted where I want to focus on that. But if there's cool projects that come in, and say like a branding thing, like I want to do that too, as long as I can make the time to do it.
Mm-hmm. If someone wants to learn more about you, where do they go?
Red11 design.com. How to think about that. So yeah, Red 11.
Sounds current.
What do you mean? Is that a good thing?
Well, you had to think about the name.
Well, yeah, it's funny because like I send that, or I have there's a place you can put like your design work on Dribble. So that's another one, dribble.com, 3 B's. You can look me up on there. But yeah, my most recent work it's red11design.com, red11design.com. Have a lot of my work, and then stuff on Dribble is just more things that I've done, but on my actual portfolio, you can see more of my thought process where I have the designs on there. Obviously, I also would talk about, say, the colors. You can see the sketching, so kind of more full gamut of my process and so on.
We'll be sure to do that. Go check out Justin Miller because your body of work is very, very impressive.
Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate you. We appreciate you being here and smoking one with us and drinking one with us. Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
I got through mine.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dang.
I ended up dumping some.
I only do this for the free whiskey and cigar.